If you share what your budget is, I can guarantee you, having been a sales agent, they will make you spend it. They will, because they know you have it.
Our motto is buy without regrets, and so
if you can buy a property that will serve you for 10 years as opposed to 3 years, that will serve you well. It's something.
Buying a great property today, that's not just what it's about. It's also getting something that could be ripe for improvement when the time is right for that investor or for the next buyer.
You think about, right, lifestyle, what's important to you? How do you get to work? What do you need for your family? What amenities like parks and shops? Then you look at the budget.
Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. I'm a mortgage broker since 2013. And in this podcast, we're going to be interviewing Australia's leading buyer's agents, ones with decades of experience, have the local insider knowledge on the street, and can really help you with your buying process, no matter whether you're a first home buyer, upgrader, investor. In this podcast, you'll get access to Australia's leading buyer's agents' minds every week on a Thursday. What's the word on the street? Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates, heading to a part of the show that I absolutely love. It's sort of the middle ground for where I live now. I can actually see it in the distance. And from where I grew up in Newcastle, heading to the Central Coast. In the studio today with Michelle Tucker from Spring Buyers Agency. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Chris? Thanks for having me.
No, our pleasure, and absolutely looking forward to this chat. We've worked together a number of times over the years. You've helped family members. And I really appreciate chatting to you. And I think it's such an interesting pocket. It's, a lot of people probably don't understand just the complexities of the Central Coast market. It's super amazing place to live. It's got water. It's got lakes. It's got coastline, national parks. It's got trains to Sydney. There's just so much going on from a lifestyle point of view and a property point of view up there. And yeah, really looking forward to having a chat about that today. But before we go there, I want to give an understanding of sort of your experience when you became a buyer's agent, how long you've been working in real estate, sort of what made you make that shift?
Yeah, sure. Love to. So my career in real estate started about 20 years ago. It's always been on the Central Coast. To be honest, I kind of fell into real estate. I was offered a role as an assistant for one of the leading agents in Terrigal, actually. So my career started in sales. He was, I think, number 2 in the network of LJ Hooker at the time. So he was a very high performer. We were always up against Matt Steinwade. We go way back. So I really started, one would say, kind of at the top in the premium end of the market. So I spent 10 years in sales there. So that really gave me that real big depth of knowledge that I have in real estate locally. We sort of operated in that high-end Terrigal, Wamberal, Avoca market as well as acreage. So I learned from a really good operator. So that was probably what really gave me the depth of knowledge. From there, I diversified a little bit and went on to work, and you may not know this either, Chris, but I went on to work in development and projects. So I went to work for a fellow named Tony Denny, who started up a development company here on the coast. And along with John Singleton and probably one other Sydney developer, we really carved the way for that Gosford revitalisation. So I spent about 5 years in projects development, which again gave me a very big understanding of that part of real estate. And it wasn't until COVID hit that we decided to start our buyer's agency. So in 2020, my business partner and I, Linda Johnson, decided that the buyers were really struggling out in the world of real estate, and that's when we decided to start our buyer's agency. Everyone told us we were nuts. The market had, everything was in chaos, and here we are starting a business. But we could just see that the buyer's agency space was going to grow, and that was sort of 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and we're right at Hal's.
Yeah, the Central Coast market, it was quite frustrating, to be honest. If I go back even 5 years before that, clients would come in and would sit down, and it's when people still saw people face to face. What's your budget? What are you doing? Where are you having kids? Where do you want to live? We would really mind considering moving to the Central Coast. Like, we just love it. And our budget's really tight in Sydney, and we can get so much more for our money up there. And I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe go up and explore there and check out different suburbs and check out your Minor or Edelong or, so you can still get to the city. And then I'm like, who can I refer it to? And I was like, there's no B8s. It was completely underserviced. But there are a few now. There's obviously a lot of ones that don't even live up on the Central Coast or have never. But I think, what's interesting though, that 10 years of experience, that was and sales and also the development side. I mean, where did that sort of teach you to give you a bit of an edge? I mean, you weren't starting from zero, right? You're starting with a huge amount of understanding what the Central Coast, what the locals want, in a completely different world, like a pre-COVID world where it was all driven by the local market.
Yeah, it was. And surprisingly, it still was driven by a lot by the Sydney market. When we were selling property in Terrigal or high-end property, if we did options, it was 50-50 whether it'd be a Sydney buyer or a Central Coast buyer, to be honest. Our stats are always sitting at around that 50-50. But I think what I have seen is I've seen the transition of the Central Coast. I've seen the difference COVID make. I was operating in the GFC. I've seen these cycles come and go. And as a sales agent, I think what you get very, very good at is valuing property. You're walking in to an owner and you don't have a price guide to work from as you do as a buyer's agent. You are walking into that owner and having to, with integrity and honesty and depth, tell them what their property's worth in the market. So you get very, very good at valuing property. You also get very good at negotiating. As a buyer's agent, yes, we negotiate, we make offers, but my depth of understanding came from negotiating between both parties. And that's something that a lot of buyer's agents haven't done.
Yeah, I think that's we've had every single different industry probably now. Civil engineer was one last week into sort of buyer's agent. There's definitely value out there, but I think when you're being a sales agent, you sort of understand those dynamics behind the scenes, the conversations the agent's going to have with the vendor, with your offer as a buyer's agent.
Oh, totally. I've sat in those lounge rooms at 10 o'clock at night with contracts and having to talk vendors through that. And the psychology of being a sales agent really helps me as a buyer's agent. And I get that respect from the selling agents as well. That I understand because I'm often saying I know what you're going through. So I can read the room very quickly, having done that for so long.
Yeah, I think that's a huge benefit, particularly because your real estate experience was in that market. I imagine if I was an agent, and I'd be like, oh, you know what I'm going through? We know you haven't worked in this market before. You don't get it. But no. I was here. I was in your seat, 10, 15 years ago. I know. And you can sort of connect on a day-to-day level, which builds trust and friendships. And I think that's one of the hardest things when you're becoming a BA, I think, is to build those relationships and networks. But I think you've sort of started from ground one where, you had those already. Right now, it's a case of letting them know that you're on the other side of the fence. Where does that really help you today? I mean, because, markets super hot last 4 years, say maybe after COVID for a few years, and how's that also helped you as the market's maybe gone a bit quieter and, maybe less driven by that sort of rush out of Sydney? How's that helping you now?
It helps us bring calm to the storm, really. A lot of people come to us and they're very, should I buy now? What should I do? I don't know what to do. I don't know the area. It really helps us. Not much rattles me in the market. I've seen it change. I've seen it dip and it'll change again. So yes, there's people a bit rattled at the moment, not really knowing what to do, but we really do bring it back to buying, whether you're an investor or an occupier, buying a good asset in a good location. No matter what the market's doing right now, most people buy property for 10 years plus, or they should be thinking that way. We understand life can change and circumstances can change, which is even more important to make sure you have a good asset. So the right location, the right street, the right property for the person. And it doesn't matter what the market's doing today. What it's doing today is not going to matter in 10 years. We're always looking at, does this suit you now? Will this suit you in the future? And who is the end buyer for this property? And if you don't have a highly desirable asset at the end of the day, you're not going to get the good sales price. So we're looking at lots of things. And I know the area inside out. I've raised my family here. I've been to the schools here. I've had other businesses here. We really bring that calm and confidence to people when they're buying.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some extra points that I love there. I'm a dad, got 2 young kids. If I reflect on life pre-kids, I didn't know. You just don't know what you don't know. I've only got young ones as well. I've got a 4 and a 6-year-old. I don't know what life's going to be like when they're 10, or when they're 15, when they're 20. The challenges of taxiing them around, or the schools or high schools.
When they're teenagers, I've got 3 children who are all in their 20s. So I know what happens when they go to teenagers. I know what happens when their friends come back. I know how important something like a pool can be because it gives a reason for them to bring their friends home. I know if you live in this area and you're driving half an hour to everything twice a day, it's going to do your head in. So we can really step people through that, and they're like, oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, I really didn't think of that. So it's not just, market knowledge, it's experience and life experience that we bring.
Yeah, and I think, particularly in the area, right, that they're the challenges that, the parents are going to see. And that makes people really sell the property, right? Like they, and when you say, oh, I want to hold it for 10 years, yeah, that makes sense because you're basing it on life today and what you know. But, 5 years down the line, you value different things. And that property can give you a much longer runway and, allow you to hold it through cycles and not have to sell it and pay the stamp duty, etc. So when we think about the Central Coast area, how do you break it down? Like, in your sort of mental, how do you break it into different sections and, talk it through, at a sort of high level, the pros and cons of different pockets and, what drives different pockets?
Well, as we know, the Central Coast is not one property market, and this is one of the biggest challenges people have coming up from Sydney. It's made up of many, many distinct micro markets. So each suburb has different demographic, it has different buyer demand, different growth drivers. So the first thing that we do with people is really try and work out why they're coming up here. Obviously, budget's important, what their lifestyle is, what are their most important needs, and then we go from there. Within those suburbs are streets and micro pockets that you don't know about. There's flood zones. There's hidden behind a mountain where you don't see the sun. There's bushfire zones. If you're going to renovate, they're really important. It's going to cost you a lot more to do it. There's so many variances in the suburbs. There's different times to train stations. If you're commuting, yes, you can be. So a lot of people come up from the northern beaches and their natural progression is I go to the peninsula, Umina, those areas. Whilst that suits a lot of people, it doesn't suit everyone because you can have 10 more minutes on the train to Gosford, the same drive to Gosford station, and a whole nother lot of suburbs open up to you. So it's really important that we understand the intricacies of all of the suburbs to be able to guide people. Investors are really priced out of the southern end of the Central Coast now. Really, to get yields that are decent enough, you're not buying on the southern end of the coast. So there's certain pockets up north that are behaving better but still close to the water. Certain pockets in Toukley and Gorican and those sort of places, if you're in the right streets, there's still a bit of work to go up there. But people notoriously want to get close to the water. It's how it works up here. How close to the beach can I be? What's my budget? How far back do I need to go? And it's so often the conversation that we're having.
Yeah, so you mentioned the peninsula, sort of the Woy Woy, Edelong, Umina, the Tonga, which is probably not a family-driven market, but, the Pearl Beach sort of pocket, and you've got like the inner rounds of sort of Gosford and around sort of the lake there, and then you've sort of got the beaches, right? I guess it's just how, different price points have been driven by a lot of older wealth to, newer wealth to sort of second homes, etc. Is there sort of pockets where, you find that are driven by, one buyer pool just predominantly that sometimes catch people out that they didn't understand it, or, types of properties you mentioned there around sort of, bushfires and, is there some sort of pockets? What's an example of somewhere where people didn't know when they're in those pockets they should have thought about?
I think people don't understand, they don't value enough aspect of a property. Like to live in a property that doesn't see the sun because it's hidden behind a hill, that it looks great in summer. Then you get to winter. I mean, I spent a lot of my sales career on acreage, and that really, really drills into you very quickly how important acreage is. As we know, land is king. If you don't get the right aspect on your acreage, you are in the shade in winter, you are Leechville, you've got leeches everywhere, and it's not pretty. So I've seen people make those mistakes as a sales agent, and then 12 months later, they're selling their house. Same applies, as a buyer in a suburban home. You don't have the right aspect, you don't have the right privacy. I see people make decisions around floor plans that they didn't think of. I'm always looking, how big a buyer pool is this going to appeal to when it comes time to sell? Because I know what, as a selling agent for so many years, what people want, and I know the struggle buyers have. So, there are so many mistakes that people can make. They don't realise that they're on a busy road, or they don't realise they're on a cut-through road. They don't realise they're in a flood zone. They don't realise there's, some social housing around the corner that could be an issue for a seller down the track. What are the schools like? If you want private schools, if you're down on the peninsula, it's a bit of a travel to private schools. you're not close. So all of those things matter.
You mentioned, I think you're absolutely right. You've gone from a sort of a floor plan level all the way up into a sort of a suburb level, and then surrounding the property, and then it's and I think that's the way to think about it, right? And then within those suburbs, sometimes you go the other way around. You'd be like, okay, I'm not going to avoid those type of, because I know aspects are a real issue there. I know that rat runs, I know schools are, etc. But it goes just all the way down to that sort of property level as well, right? And how much work it needs, how much it's going to cost to do it, and and what's the future buy. So, but when you think about sort of the upper parts of the Central Coast, what's your sort of take on sort of, you mentioned that they're still, going through a bit of a transition and gentrifying, I guess. How are you sort of seeing things shift up further and further north, I guess, up the Central Coast?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're seeing a lot of buyers agents from out of area come into places like, Gorick and San Remo, Lake and Munmora. Whilst these areas are gentrifying, and if I go back, 20 years ago, my gosh, they're so different. But there's still areas up there that I'd be very cautious of at the moment. And we're seeing buyers agents come in from Newcastle and from Sydney, and they're just snapping up whatever, wherever. They don't really understand the nuances of it. So I'm still, for our investors, drilling down into micro pockets within those suburbs that I know are going to fly first, if that makes sense, over the next 10 years. Sometimes the demographic change on the coast can be slow. So it's about understanding what people are going to want to buy, in 10, 20 years. We don't always have a crystal ball, but we know the ones that will take off first, and we're kind of going for those rather than in the depths of these suburbs that have got a long way to go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it was a question I usually ask, but, usually on these things, we have a chit chat with guests prior to they come on. And, you said something quite interesting around sort of mortgage brokers have sort of been coming to you a bit recently. What's the difference you've seen and versus, say, longer term and brokers?
Interesting. I had one yesterday. We've had more mortgage brokers reach out to us probably in the last 3 months than we've ever had. And I don't mean blanket emails, just fired out to every buyer's agent in the state. We always get those. But I've had considered phone calls from people. And I think it's probably off the back of buyers being a little bit more considered now and perhaps having made mistakes in their investment journey. So they're really looking to partner, which is great because I know you've been a big advocate for this. They're really looking to partner with a buyer's agent that has local knowledge. We have a property management arm of our business as well, which we look at the investment journey holistically, not just what you buy, it's how you take care of it down the track. So they're looking for a partner who actually knows the area, knows what they're doing. I think they've probably seen too much of the borderless buyers agents who just grab whatever they think suits and don't really know the area. So that's been a really good sign that things are moving forward in a good way.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. It was a story that I have wanted to hear more and more. I think one of the big frustrations I've had in the broking world, and I've been, it's not like this is new. It's people have sort of seen this is, brokers absolutely provide loans and they, help people get better rates. But sometimes that next step to, okay, you actually know more than your client often here. You know that either this decision is going to potentially be a good one or a bad one, and maybe they're heading in the wrong direction. Maybe they need to go get some help. And maybe you don't need to have to do that yourself, but maybe you can just figure out who could be some people they can go to and trust. And
yes,
it sounds like those buyers, those mortgage brokers are actually taking that step and go, okay, I need to learn more. I need to find some people. And if they're doing that with you, they're likely also doing that with other BAs. And I think this is great because there should be this sort of real collaboration working with clients to sort of help get the right outcome. It's a win-win for everyone on that sort of conversation. And
getting out of
that's really comforting. I think
and coming to meet, they actually are taking it a step further and not just calling and saying, let's meet, let's catch up. I want to meet you. I want to know how you operate. It's great. Like it's a really good thing for investors.
Yeah, that's right. And also the, typically maybe they were looking for clients before, whereas now they're looking for actually, no, I want to take care of my client. And not for, I think this is going to be one of the challenges of the financial advice industry, has also got to make this pivot as well. They've also got to basically go, okay, well, 55% of household wealth in property. Most of my clients' wealth in property. My clients are making decisions around properties every day. That's going to have a huge impact on their sort of overall wealth. I need to make sure I refer it to sort of someone who we can trust. And clients are also working with people all over the country. I think it's often they're not picking the local advisor, the local broker, the local accountant. They're finding online who they want to work with and are happy to work virtually. And so I think that's a really good story. But going back to sort of, the Central Coast and sort of your experience within that market, you mentioned there around 50% of buyers are coming from Sydney. Maybe that's gone a bit slower in recent years. Maybe it's higher. But what's some of the other things that people don't underestimate in the Central Coast market? Just, why it's just so attractive to many different buyer pools.
Oh, look, I think it's driven by, of course, it's driven by budget, but it's also driven by lifestyle. It's a beautiful place to live. And interesting statistics, in 2016 census and then the next census, there's 25% of people on the Central Coast that wherever their work is, they're working from home. That used to be about 4%. So there's no doubt that connectivity to Sydney, even before COVID hit, that was the Gosford story. It was the fact that you can live and have the lifestyle that we do here and still connect back to Sydney. The difference being 5-day commute before COVID was just a lot. People still did it. They did. And I know that because I used to sell them property all the time. But it was a big considered decision. Once that's dropped to 2 and 3 days, and as I said, 25% of people on the last census day were working from home, it's opened the floodgates to say, look, I only have to go to the city twice a week now. So it's driven by connectivity there. It's driven by lifestyle. I mean, look at it. You can have acres. You can have by the beach, by the lake. You can have, and we've got lovely restaurants now. We're not like we used to be 20 years ago where it's hard pressed to find a restaurant. We've got operators like, in Terrigal, the Pavilion. They own the Burleigh Pavilion. There's so many choices now. People are going, it's not that bad. You can have a lifestyle that is more relaxed without the traffic. And interestingly, one of the biggest things on our buyers list at the moment is that community vibe. They're wanting the little village shops down the road. I live in Foresters Beach, and for the first time in my career, I have seen buyers, and we're only 8 minutes from Terrigal, so we're very close. But when I was a sales agent in Terrigal, they'd go, oh, Foresters Beach, I'm not going out there. That's miles away. Now I'm seeing buyers that could afford Terrigal or Wombrel are coming to Foresters Beach. And the reason they're doing that is the community vibe. We've got the little village shops. Everyone knows your name. Our office is down in that village. They're looking for lifestyle, connection, community, beach, schools. So it's become a pretty desirable place to live, not just a place that, I can't afford Sydney, so I'll go there.
Yeah, that community element is often sort of, I do think COVID's really flipped it, right? Your community maybe was because you're so much out of your house. It was work. It was, you got time on weekends. But, I think working from home a little bit, and a lot of the people moving to the Central Coast have got the ability to do that. And so it's a double win, right? I can work from home. Plus I know everyone up at the local coffee shop. It's a little bit like the beaches where I live, that's particularly the upper beaches is, people are moving here because, and then I think it's this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. If more people move there with that mindset, then they make effort and the community gets better. And then the coffee shop's busier, and then it starts to become a community in itself because of the people moving there that want it. So I've definitely seen that happen as well. And I agree, often a lot of people would have moved to the Central Coast because of budget, but when you can compare what you can get, and if you've got that flexibility with work, you can, get the lifestyle, commute. The Central Coast, it's also extremely landlocked as well. Like I think, an issue in an area when you go, okay, there's lifestyle there, but then there's no limit on supply. You go, oh, I'm still very nervous. But Central Coast is topographically and with water, it's extremely challenged, right?
It is, and hence why we're big advocates of buying. And look, a lot of people come up here and want to be as close to the beach as they can. And that's a great goal. But without the local knowledge, you can make big mistakes on where to go. We don't really buy too often out in those areas where they're subdividing a lot of blocks and building new homes. Yes, that's for some buyers. But what we find is our buyers are coming to the coast. They're young families, a lot of them. And I'm talking owner-occupiers here, not investors. But, it's true for investors as well. But we're getting them as close to the beach as we can. But we're getting them into areas that they probably wouldn't have identified themselves. We're making sure that they don't buy a DIY nightmare of a property that's going to cost them a fortune and they're not going to be able to add decent value to. We're making sure that they buy in the absolute best location they can for their money, and they're going to build wealth. Because let's face it, whether you're buying an investment or an owner property, you want to build wealth. It could be a stepping stone to your next property. You want something that someone's really going to want when you go to sell it. That's top of mind for us. And if that means spending weeks educating people, showing them different places, that's what we do. And that's why people keep coming back. They feel guided. They feel trust. They know we have their back. And they often get into property that they just wouldn't have found.
I think I find with the market is you've got lots of roads that, it's like the hills, and then there's the beach, and there's the lake. You got to cross here, and you know what I mean? And you can find there's just a lot to sort of digest, and, and every market's a bit different because they are the topography and the hills and the aspect, and, and then you completely miss a pocket because you always drive on that road and you didn't know that this little pocket exists. And,
exactly.
And in that pocket, this is the better pocket of that pocket. I think it's a great market to be a BA in, I think, because you've got a really strong, easy to add value because there is just so many mistakes people can make within that market, I find, compared to, say, maybe a quintessential sort of suburb where it's easy to value X property versus Y, even though there's huge amount you can add there as well. Do you find that as well, though, when you're sort of seeing some sales go through, you start to go, only if they knew that that part of vocal was really challenging. Do you sometimes get surprised and feel a bit frustrated, I guess, at the people who haven't reached out for help and they're buying something that is going to be hard to sell one day?
Absolutely. Happens all the time. That is the reason Linda and I didn't start our business because we were passionate about property. We are, but that's not the reason. You hear a lot of buyer's agents say, I built my first property at 24 and I just love property. We started our buyer's agency because we saw firsthand the mistake buyers made and the challenges buyers had. We wanted to help that. We wanted to make a difference. And that's what we do. I get clients sending me property whilst we're working with them, as you do. They go, I saw this online, thought I'd flick it through. And I just say, this is where they waste time. It's in a flood zone. It floods. The road will be cut off. They're like, I thought it was priced really well for a really good property. So they would have wasted time driving up, looking at it, wasting money, perhaps even buying it without even knowing that in a flood event, they're underwater. So there are so many risks. But then there's a lot of the Central Coast is in the flood development zone, which means it doesn't flood, but it is subject to development control. People don't know the difference. They're like, but it's subject to flood control. What does that mean? Does that mean I flood? No, you're not going to flood. But if you renovate, you are subject to development controls with floor heights and things like that. They don't know. So all of those things.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's often we find in the Central Coast market is the Sydney families going up there and, it's easy to fall in love with the photos, right? I'd say that's one of those markets where the photos can be amazing. The view, and that's a good job of an agent to sell the lifestyle, but you fall in love with the property, but you don't sort of know the actual, what you're really buying. It's almost like there's this
100%.
And it's also like, the mission of leaving Sydney, often because it's not far enough to want to stay. So they try to make it work, or they're like, I'll just nip up there after work at 5 o'clock and everything's rushed. And, and then they don't want to be going for that, like viewings every sort of, because when you're hot in the market, you got to get up there and you got to be there when the agent has something good. And I feel like it's also the pain of buying sometimes difficult because they're not living there and they're trying to buy before they move. And so I find that there's a lot of mistakes people can make just because of it's quite hard to actually secure because they're not living there and they don't know obviously what the locals know.
You have just hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what happens. People look at property. They don't know one suburb from another. They jump around from there to there to there to there, scattered approach. But they come up here and it's like, this feels so good. They walk into a house that's styled. It looks, the vibe is coastal. They're like, I can just see myself here. But they don't understand there is a much better property over there, or this one's overpriced. They don't even know. That sounds cheap to them and they're like, this is good price. It's not. It's actually overpriced. So our job is to show them the best they can get for their money, because you don't just come up here and grab something because it's, I love this vibe and it's a quiet street and I can walk to the beach. Yeah, but you can do so much better 2 streets over. Or that's our job. And I think people once they fall in love with a property, the blinkers come on and they don't see. I don't see that. I don't see that. I've had people walk away from a property and then we debrief on it later. And I said, well, for a start, there's no garage. Oh, I didn't even notice that. Yeah, you're right. There's no garage. But they'd fallen in love with the feeling of living there. So that's what we do in a calm, considered way, is say, this property's great, but have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Have you thought of that? No, I haven't. Maybe I should look a bit more. Yeah, we think you should. So that's what we do.
Yeah, I think I sort of laugh as well because, when you're going through property decisions yourself, you make all these mistakes. Like, even if you've been in the industry, you've been working in it, you work BAs, your whole emotions take over. I sort of just reflect on, now move to the beaches and and then we upgrade and, we're in Melbourne and, watching our clients and, it's just really hard when you're actively trying to buy in the market. Your brain starts sabotaging you. And I think that's it. You fall in love with the wrong properties. You can go to viewings and you just completely haven't even don't even have any bedrooms there. Or it wasn't even really a bedroom you thought it was. And, yeah, absolutely. I've seen those mistakes where you haven't even looked over the back fence. You haven't even thought about privacy. You were just so enchanted with the view out of one window. And I think that's the Central Coast market.
The other big challenge, and this is one of the other challenges and what people don't realise and why they need to get representation is, it's very difficult and you would know this, if you're looking at property up here, you're talking to the sales agents, you want opportunity to come your way. Yes, they'll really only show you what they've got listed, but you kind of have to share a budget with them, really. Like, you have to give them some idea. They're going to ask, or they're not going to take you seriously if you don't. So you share your budget. You want to keep a bit under your belt because you don't want to tell them what you've really got, but then you're kind of missing out on opportunity. So if you share what your budget is, I can guarantee you, having been a sales agent, they will make you spend it. They will, because they know you have it. And they might have a conversation with us, and not discounting selling agents. They're working for the vendor and they're doing a great job. There's a lot of good selling agents up here. But if they know you've got it and they know the vendor wants it, they'll make you pay it, where you could have bought it for $100,000 less if they didn't know what your budget was. So they're the problems with sharing what you have. You either don't share and you miss opportunity, you do share and they make you spend it.
Yeah, it's that awkward conversation that comes, right? If they do know your budget, there's ways for someone independent, because they could find you might have bid it on something, I don't know, 2.1 million, missed out at auction, but you want to buy something at 1.9. They know you got 2.1 because they know you bid it on that because all the agents talk and they know every buy. They know everything about you. Like, let's be real. The data they've got behind the scenes on you is not what, you'd love to get access to it, isn't it? Oh my God, I can't believe I said that 6 years ago. Yeah, I think there are ways that independent person in the middle to reframe the negotiation and win the control there and, create that scarcity and be very skilled at winning the power back. And I find that, that's often where buyers, they get overconfidence on finding something and they're educated on the local market and they're out there looking and they're good at being maybe less emotional and understanding what's a good asset. And then all of a sudden they get to the offer stage and it's like, what card do I play? And which one do I now do? And it all starts to unravel. And then it's almost too late because they've got the property they want and they're scrambling. They're on the back foot. And I think that's where, one of the benefits. When you think about, it's one of the questions I love to ask on here is when you look at the reviews, you look at after the client's settled or even a year or 2 or 3 years later, what are some of the intangible things that they say, Michelle, Linda, that was just so valuable what you guys did. It wasn't what I expected. It was like, I expected to maybe find something and get in a good deal, but you did this, this, and this for me. And that really was a huge value add. What are some of those intangible sort of things they weren't expecting?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's normally around, even though we save 99% of our clients' money, it's not always about that. In fact, it's usually not about that. It's about they didn't know what they didn't know. And whilst you can share your service offering to them and they engage you, they really don't understand. It's not until they buy, they go, oh my God, I did not understand the things that I didn't know. We felt guided. We felt you had our back and you gave us the confidence to move forward without questioning what we were doing. Often if they'd bought property before and hadn't had a buyer's agent, they'd gone into property still questioning their decision. Have I done the right thing? Is this the right property? Whether it is or not, they went into the one with us feeling confident and secure that they bought the best they could for their money and they weren't buying a problem. They didn't feel scared that, oh, I've bought a problem, I've bought a great property. And it's just that guidance that, they felt looked after and cared for and that they got the best they could for their money.
Yeah, that sort of confidence to transact is because I talk about that scenario, that still gets the rubber to the road, sign the contract, and every single buyer does this. I mean, if they don't, once they purchase it, they still keep the apps. They still keep looking at listings. They want to prove to themselves that they bought the best asset, even though they can't change it. And, unless they had that real confidence that, they'd had someone to bounce their fears with and talk it through, often they just get this like resentment, or not resentment, but there's this fear of, is it the wrong decision? And that can basically overwhelm the whole buying journey because they're like so fearful of making a mistake. And I think, and sometimes they don't make a decision because they're worried about making a mistake. So I think there's a lot of value in just that final, sign the contract. You're okay. This is good. You're going to be okay. Which is really hard to do with a partner because usually,
They see what goes into it and they see what we do. And it's at that point they realize, my God, I just didn't know what I didn't know. I could have made all sorts of mistakes. I wouldn't have even asked that question. I wouldn't even have thought of that. I would have given away that leverage to the selling agent. Even when we talk about strategy, I'm about to do that with a client after this. We're going to try and buy a property this afternoon and we're talking about strategy. I guarantee you I will ask questions of them that they wouldn't even have thought of. It's around the timing of an offer. And I've made sure that they haven't given away leverage to that sales agent yet, because I know that every word that I speak from the moment I go into a property matters. I've been a sales agent. I know when people give away their leverage, and we don't do that. So sales agents don't even ask us what our client's budget is. They don't even ask. I've known many of them so many years. They trust that if we're there looking at a property, we have a client. We're not the buyer's agent who goes in just to get videos and post it on social media. In fact, we're terrible on social media. We're too busy buying property. If I'm there and I'm looking, I'm interested, and that's all they need to know. And they're happy with that.
Michelle, it's been an awesome chat. So much gold in there. Really appreciate it. We've had clients work with you and Linda multiple times for many years. And so you're in super safe hands. And today's just sort of highlighted that more than ever. And so thanks so much for coming on and appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it. I love the work you're doing with buyers agents. I think the collaboration moving forward is going to really add value to buyers. So thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening today. We hope you got lots of value out of it. If you'd like to speak to our guest today, there's links in the show notes on how you can get in contact. And if you're buying your first home, upgrading, renovating, or need any finance-related queries, obviously we'd love to help. There's links in the show notes to us as a mortgage broker, and we look forward to next week's episode.